Electric Jam Podcast.
Greetings, salutations, and welcome to the darkness. Today is a special edition of the Electric Jam Podcast, where we're only going to stick on one subject, and we teased it last week. Today we're talking about the dark arts and heavy metal and the links between the two. And I know, Richard, you have been looking forward to this so much.
Oh, yes.
That's a very creepy oh yes.
No, I do. I think
are you twiddling your fingers?
The reason why is because there's just so much absolute nonsense about this subject, particularly occultism and its portrayal in the media and online. I'm actually, I'm a history graduate, so I did ancient history and all kinds of history to get my degree back in the day. And one of the subjects I did a lot on was kind of like theology, occultism, and stuff like that. So I kind of have a lot of, interest in the subject. And the crossover with music is super interesting because it all kind of hinges around like one guy, and you'll know who it is when we talk about him. But it's basically one guy, and what is known about him and what he was is two very different things. So I don't know, Chris, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I want to start with the first and probably the most talked about version, and that's Robert Johnson. So Robert Johnson, if you don't know who he was a blues musician. And the beginning of his career, everyone said he sucked. He couldn't sing. He couldn't play. They were like, just hang it up, Robert. You're no good. And he kind of disappeared off the map for about a year or two. And then he came back and he started playing gigs around the Mississippi Delta area. And that was kind of the beginning of Delta blues. And when he came back, he was a monster. He was an absolute powerhouse. Not only could he play guitar, he was a great singer. He was a very clever songwriter, and all of that criticism just kind of went away. And so the big story behind that is that he made a Faustian deal at the crossroads where he met up with the devil and sold his soul for fame to be able to play the blues.
And he died at 27, right?
He was the first of the 27 Club.
Yeah, which is very good. It's a very cool club. Well, I say cool club. No, it's not cool, but there's a lot of people that seemingly died at the age of 27.
That were incredibly talented. Yeah.
Yeah, Jim Morrison.
But yeah, he was an awful musician. And unfortunately, I don't think that we have any of the older recordings. I think all we have is the really good stuff that he put out after this supposed deal. But that kind of kicks off a mythology that, because rock and roll and heavy metal came from blues. So that kind of kicks off the mythology of how that's kind of always been intertwined. You know, rock is supposed to be dangerous and edgy, and a lot of bands have used, satanic imagery or scary imagery to kind of get their point across. But that's kind of the genesis of it, I think. I couldn't find any other stories that were much older than Robert Johnson. So,
I mean, there's like things like, it goes kind of like Mozart goes all the way back to, in terms of occult influences in music. I mean, he attributes
definitely
stuff to things like that. But yeah, the modern music, it kind of like Robert Johnson kicked things off, and then obviously in the 60s you had the resurgence of like Thelema with Aleister Crowley, became like, again, very well-known figure in music. Obviously the Beatles, Bowie, everyone kind of referenced him at the time, and then it became like this word of mouth thing. And I think he'd been dead for 15, 20 years by that point. So yeah, and it's the whole underbelly of like occult beliefs, which musicians tend to have kind of a natural proclivity towards, because I think it's kind of like anything. You're searching for its meaning beyond what you're told is correct. And I think that the whole
that's something that artists just have.
Yeah, we've kind of hit this at on this before, where it's the idea of where do things come from? Where does art come from? Where does creativity come from? Like, it's this idea that there's something larger going on. And if you live in, sort of early 20th century kind of society in America and much of the UK as well, it was heavily controlled by the church. Like, people went to church. I mean, the UK is pretty much like the church is non-existent now, but 40, 50 years ago, it wasn't. It was a thing. And I think in America it's a bit different because you guys are still pretty churchy, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So
definitely.
Yeah. And I think it's the church has obviously had a big, well, not just the church, but like Christianity as a whole in terms of like a political institution in the development of the West has effectively written the history in a way that kind of presents some of the ideas that people like Crowley and the other side of cult writers espouse as being satanic and all that kind of stuff, when it actually isn't. That's a kind of like takeaway. Because I remember when I started getting to this, I was like, oh, so it's not. It's just, it's kind of like an amalgamation of like older religious beliefs from, thousands and thousands of years ago that predate, the Bible by, thousands of years. But because
there's Crowley, there's John Dee, who was kind of his...
Yeah, John Dee, the Enochian language and the table and stuff. So,
and then there's also LaVey, Anton LaVey, who had LaVeyanism, Satanism, which was kind of a different thing.
But the thing with the Church of Satanism, it's an atheistic institution in that they don't believe in a deity. They don't believe in the deity of the devil.
It's believe in yourself.
It's like an antinomian belief system where it's like, no, it's just we reject the Christian ideology that society's been kind of has foisted on people, which I wouldn't say is necessarily a bad thing. I don't say, looking after people, loving people isn't necessarily a bad thing. But, what the church gets up to behind closed doors isn't usually what it's preaching in the pulpit, if you get my drift.
No, definitely not. And, being really into theology myself, if you take the Bible at face value and you take everything literally, it just doesn't line up with science, and there's some problems in there.
Well, it's not just that though, but there's like the translation issues and stuff. So okay,
oh, definitely. We don't even know what the Bible looks like. We don't have a real copy of it.
But the thing with occultism is occultist means hidden. It just means something that's hidden. So that could be knowledge, it could be belief systems, it could be whatever. And they're either hidden by time or they're hidden for, reasons that you have to join being initiated into an order to kind of understand them correctly. And they go back, you have the Kabbalah, which was the kind of Jewish mysticism, which is a big component of Crowley. Well, Crowley's part of the Golden Dawn, obviously. And then he left that and became the Thelema, which kind of is like, the new Aeon, kind of what lives on now. And that's
the
what he's
OTO.
on now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the Book of the Law. But yeah, it's kind of these old ideas that were then kind of put to bed. Like the idea of the devil with the horns, that's just Pan, a pagan god, repackaged up by the church to be something evil because they needed a devil. So, right. And it's like all these little Christmas things. Once you get into kind of theology, into the nuts and bolts of it, it's very interesting, and particularly with with very early Christian church. Like if you look at the Orthodox Christianity versus like Catholicism, like in the veneration of Sophia, you just don't get that in like traditional Western Christianity. Whereas in which is insane because it's a whole goddess just isn't part of the kind of like Western. But I'd say Western, I mean like kind of UK, European, American kind of Christianity. Well, they don't have that.
Well, there's also a bunch of stuff that's kind of behind closed doors too that they teach you in seminary school. And there's a really funny book, and they made it into a YouTube video called Satan's Guide to the Bible. And they go through the things that they teach you in seminary school. And the reason that I know about seminary school is because I thought about becoming a priest after my divorce. And I am not kidding whatsoever.
I didn't know
Right
that.
before I met you, I was about 6 months away from doing that with my life and hanging up guitar and just going in a completely different, because I was like just done. But yeah, the stuff that they teach you in seminary school, there's all these accoutrements, that you wouldn't think kind of go with the Bible, but they kind of lay it out for you at the beginning of seminary school, and they're like, okay, first of all of this is wrong, but check it out. This is how you have to teach it.
Yeah,
so that's really interesting.
Exoteric, isn't it? So exoteric is kind of like the mass stuff for the masses. So what you told, before people could read the Bible, the exoteric stuff, they'd have to go to the church, and the priest would read them the Bible, or the vicar would read the Bible, and they go, oh, okay. And then everyone could start to read, and then everyone kind of start drawing their own influences from the Bible, which is why you have all these denominations and stuff like that. But there's so many different weird things. Like the one that always stuck out to me, and this is the one that, because I went to a Catholic primary school when I was a little kid, and I even remember during this point, it stuck out to me when they were like reading stuff, and I was like, what? Like, because it's even translated into like plural. So it's in Genesis when they're talking about, and they made man in the image of them. And it's derived from Elohim, which is, it's Hebrew, but it's also plural and feminine.
Right.
So, you came from women, which I was like, what? Okay, that's quite, and that's right. That's
but also they don't exist yet. And also they're going to be oppressed because they're lesser.
That's like chapter 1. Yeah, that's like page 1, chapter 1 of the Bible. So yeah, it's a very interesting subject. And the idea within music, that music can be satanic and all this kind of stuff is, I don't really buy into it personally. I know there's some bands that are kind of like, vehemently kind of, satanic in the way they do things. But I think that with them, it's more they're just not very nice people, and they just don't like society. I don't think it's got anything to do with the devil. It's just kind of like something to be, to sort of make them look a bit edgy. Because I think the idea of like actual, it does happen, but it's like this, you look at like the Satanic Panic that happened, right? That was an absolute shit show. People like
lived through it.
Normal people, like innocent people, had their lives ruined because of this insane kind of like conspiracy theory that was completely like factually incorrect. Like people, it was like Salem 2.0. It was really bad.
Oh yeah, I played Dungeons and Dragons, and if you played Dungeons and Dragons in the 80s, you were done for. You're going to hell because that's witchcraft. And I'm like, no, I'm just making a character on paper. It's a level 17 elf. What are you talking about? But yeah, it's kind of permeated through music, and I think some people do it for show, like Slayer.
God, it's 100%. It's literally, it's just bravado, all of it. Like, because they don't know what it means. Like the pentagram, right? The actual kind of true meaning of that is not satanic. Like,
no,
anyone who's read a book, anyone who's read a book on like theology or any kind of like, pre-Christian religion knows that a pentagram and also a swastika is not a symbol of hate or evil. It's not. Obviously, you're not going to walk around with a swastika on any tattooed on you these days.
That's kind of changed now.
Yeah, but it's a Hindu symbolism of peace. That's obviously changed. That's been kind of owned by the Nazis, so that's not coming back. But the pentagram is, that's not an evil symbol. Same with like Baphomet as well. The symbol of that. It was who was it? It was the writer, the guy Levi, Eliphas Levi, and that was Baphomet was like considered it was a demon Baphomet, but it's not. It's an amalgamation of like the 4 man and woman with the 4 seasons. It's like a representative, like an image, an archetype, if you will, of like the material existence on Earth. So it's all these like little things that you just like once you start learning, you're kind of like, oh right, and then you go, oh well, maybe there is more to this than, It's like there's a whole kind of like backstory to this that kind of is just, you're told not to look there, but once you start looking there, it's kind of, it's super interesting in the sense because you can see where modern Christianity has borrowed, basically pretty much all of its mythology from these older religions, which are now considered occult and demonic and stuff like that. Like
Zoroastrianism. That's what I was saying. Christmas.
Really, yeah,
Christmas was a Norse holiday for the winter equinox, and suddenly it's Jesus's birthday now. That's what Christmas is. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So so I think with music you have like stuff. Well, there's like Burzum and stuff like that, and it's bands that have like murdered people and killed each other and burnt churches and stuff like that. But it's the idea that, and then obviously I don't know what you call them, the churchy right wing, which that's a thing, right? It's
a very big thing in America.
Yeah, it's just they always need a bad guy. So these like stupid kids with their satanic symbology, which it isn't, and they put it what it is, but they're only doing it to annoy the other people, which is probably the same like in the sort of 70s and 80s or 90s with the rise of satanic themed rock music was kind of, or metal was sort of done as this kind of just to be extreme and anti society, anti whatever, anti the values that your parents have or that your jocks at school might have. It's a way of sort of delineating yourself away from the crowd. And bands like Slayer and stuff, they're not Satanists. I know that for a fact. So,
no.
It's like
they don't go home and worship Satan.
Well, Black Sabbath is the prime example. Black Sabbath is like the band that everyone's like, oh, the devil and all that kind of stuff. They're just not. They're just not Satanist. Even listen to the lyrical content of their songs is very Christian heavy. Tony Iommi is a Christian. Ozzy is a Christian. Tony Iommi wears a cross. He's always worn a cross.
So is Ozzy.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not. But people go, oh, it sounds evil, so it must be. It's like the same people that listen to a sad song and go, I can't listen to that because it makes me depressed. It's like, well, have some control over your emotions and just learn to appreciate stuff for what it is.
It's so like literal. the people who came out against Led Zeppelin in the early 80s because those interviews surfaced with Jimmy Page where he was talking about reading Aleister Crowley, and he was quoting pages from the books, and he was talking about how those books kind of inspired him to write a few songs. But at the same time, Lord of the Rings also inspired him to write a few songs. But they took that, and then they were like, well, if you play it backwards, it says Satan loves you or whatever. And that was a big thing, too. And it was just such BS. It's just so silly. Like, they weren't
brought to you by the same people that basically said marijuana was going to turn you into a roving lunatic and you're going to murder your family. And now you can go and buy it in a shop around the corner from your house. So, these are the same people. They just have no clue. And it's just reactive kind of nonsense. And it's all predicated on appealing to voters and moral outrage, all that kind of stuff, just outrage about everything. But when it comes to religion, it seems to be like, that's the one, they get, don't talk about religion. And it's like, well, if you want to be religious, right? If you want to have, like, I think of like religion and spirit. I'm not religious at all. I don't adhere to any kind of doctrine. I hate dogma, organized religion, man-made, whatever. But stuff like spirituality, something about your, consciousness, something that is personal to you that you can explore by yourself. You do like meditation or, working with things, working through books, listening to new ideas, that kind of stuff that's going to expand your mind creatively in terms of what you can perceive, in terms of your appreciation of the world around you. And even things like art and how you approach art and how you play. They're all good things. And that's what this kind of stuff does. It's philosophy. That's more than anything. It's philosophy on the finer aspects of reality and life and your kind of relationship to it. And that's what the Kabbalah is. That's what, the Golden Dawn was teaching, the I Ching. These things go back for thousands of years. It's like the Golden Dawn and Crowley are very like late in the game. There was a lot of people before them. Going back a long, 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 long time.
Oh, yeah. Crowley was just the guy who put it all together and made it an amalgamation instead
he did a lot of good stuff.
He's a very
notable guy. And he's very clever
definitely.
Guy. I mean, he was also a horrible, horrible man, but,
terrible person. I wouldn't want to hang out with him.
I mean, he was awful. Like, some of the things he did were horrific, but I think he would have done them anyway. I don't think it's regardless if he was a occultist or not. I think that was his one saving grace, was that he actually had a mind for the spiritual aspect of things, which kind of allowed him to sort of, actually put some positivity into his otherwise very turbulent life. But the thing with Hendrix, the thing with Zeppelin is interesting because there's an interview during Page and he actually talks about it, and he just said he just has interesting ideas. But then if you look at someone like Danny Carey from Tool, he's like full into the occult. And I'm pretty sure he's kind of like Thelema, like Western esotericism. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm pretty sure he's ceremonial, right? He looks like he's kind of got all the garb and all the gear.
He is, and the way that he sets up his drum set, the way that his drums are positioned are a thelemic symbol, if you're familiar with them. And then on the drums themselves and on the drum heads, he has pentagrams and pentacles and stuff, which is also a part of all of that. But yeah, you even mentioned it one time, the drum tech that was like afraid to touch his drums.
It wasn't the drum tech. It was some crew, some like third party roadie crew in Bible Belt were like, oh, I don't really want to touch his drum kit in case it's evil and satanic. And it's just like,
like it's going to rub off on you or something.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very odd that that's a thing. I mean, you look at them, you would never think that Tool was a satanic band, even though it's right there in front of you. And I remember seeing a practice shot from their practice room, and he's got it's when Danny Carey was shooting in his room, and he's got this whole like crazy like sigils on the wall painted. It looked amazing. I mean, I don't know what any of it was, but it'd be awesome to have him on. I'd love to pick his brains about it. Like if we get him as a guest on the podcast and just chat to him about this. We wouldn't even mention Tool. We just want to talk about the occult stuff.
Well, it would depend on where he is in the OTO, and it would depend on how much he could actually say, because that's kind of a oath that you take at the very beginning. There's some things that you can say, and there are things that are common knowledge, and then there are some things that you can't say. So, but it would still be very interesting. It would still be very interesting to see his approach to it and how it affects, not only his life but his art.
Yeah, true. But what I also find very bizarre is that it's people who aren't even religious get kind of like caught up in this and being like, oh, like Maud Flanders are like, oh no, it's like somebody thinking of children. It's like, well, it's just bravado. But in metal music, it is. I can genuinely not think of a single band that I would say like, yeah, they're satanic. Like the Ghost, everyone's like, oh yeah, they're satanic. They're not. It's just poking fun at the Catholic Church.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But, that's it. It's just poking fun at the Catholic Church because the Catholic Church is probably one of them. Obviously over the years it's probably done a lot of good, but it's also done like some really, really, really heinous stuff. And that's just not a few things. You're talking going back throughout the entire history from its initial setup to even like modern day. Like last week, there's probably some scandal. Yeah, absolutely. I had something I wanted to say, and then I was very much paying attention to you. But yeah, there are people like Danny Carey, but in the 70s, it was very low key, the whole Satanic Panic thing, and kind of chronicling it. So we had Robert Johnson, and then we had bands like Led Zeppelin, who came out in the late 60s and early 70s, and this new style of rock and roll was just the worst, right? So you had locally kind of pastors and churches telling you that this stuff was evil. And then it didn't really catch on until Tipper Gore. And Tipper Gore, who is, former Vice President Gore, that's his wife. In the 80s, she went on a rampage. Oh God,
it's all of these bands.
Bloody first lady, isn't it? It's like with Hillary Clinton with the Parental Advisory stickers.
Yeah, well, she wasn't.
Like, come on.
Yeah, Tipper Gore is the one who started the Parental Advisory stickers.
I thought that was Hillary. I thought that was Hillary Clinton.
No, it was implemented in I think 1990 or 1991, but she was the person who started that, and she went to court about it, saying, we got to save the children from this evil music. You know, this one kid was listening to Ozzy Osbourne and he killed himself. And so many artists went and testified. And I think the most famous one, and there's plenty of videos of it on YouTube if you want to watch it, is Dee Snider from Twisted Sister.
Yeah, I've seen
because
this. Yeah.
he was one of the targeted bands.
Yeah.
And he was like so well spoken and so well meaning about it. And it was so good because she's saying, you know, these are heathens. These are people that are out of control. And he comes up there and presents himself in like just the nicest, calmest manner that he possibly could.
Because
you know,
it's
saying
ridiculous.
This is art, and we do it because it's fun, first and foremost. Second of all, it sells records. And third of all, it's fun.
Yeah.
You know?
That's
and
it. That's the thing. That's the thing. Kiss, you know, these bands,
Kiss
it's theatrical.
went through the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's why stories like the Faustian story is so popular and has been. There's been many variations of it through the years because it's so popular, because it kind of like plays on something that's very sort of integral to humans. Obviously, it's got the lust for greed and power and control and stuff like that. I mean, we even have it now. Like the modern Faustian thing is that, you know, all these people in government have sold themselves to the, you know, the devil or aliens or interdimensional,
the Illuminati,
shape-shifting reptiles or whatever. And that's what they're doing to get the power, and that's why they're in charge, and that's why I don't have anything, and that's also why the Earth's flat, and all this kind of stuff. And it's like it just all plays into all this like weird kind of like rabbit holes of psychological strangeness. When the actual reality of the situation is, it's still interesting, but it's a lot drier and it's a lot more philosophical than what people, you know. It's kind of like it's kind of like arguing with my 5-year-old about something. I'm just not going to do it because he doesn't know enough. So I'm just going to be like, yeah, that's okay, that's great, yeah. But I'm not going to get into an argument with him about something because it's the same thing. It's like, you know, well, no, this is evil because look at that symbol. And it's like, well, what does that symbol mean to you? What does it mean? No, it means the devil. It's like, why? And because, you know, it's evil. It doesn't. It's like, so if you don't know something, this is the thing. People are so eager to just quickly kind of jump on something and, you know, burn something to death or hang people or, you know, incinerate people or whatever, just because they think, oh, they might be evil. And it's like, well, surely you want some kind of like proof for that before you kind of just go all in on it. But people don't, and particularly with religion, it makes them go crazy. You know,
This whole topic came back to me because it's something that, first of all, not anyone, I haven't heard anyone talk about it in a while, as far as, you know, heavy metal being evil. We don't have a lot of bands like that anymore. But
well, Slayer's back with their
Slayer is back.
satanic brand, but it's not satanic, so it's just kind of like, I don't know. It's like if McDonald's released like a Satan burger. It's just a marketing thing. It's no, McDonald's isn't Satanist, but you know, probably doesn't believe in Satanism. They just like the money that it makes them.
Well, I was going through my albums and I came across Antichrist Superstar by Marilyn Manson. And the insert to that album, as you unfold it, it's a bunch of symbols from the Kabbalah and a bunch of statements from the Kabbalah. And, you know, that caused such an uproar when that album came out. And I remember thinking to myself, this is 1996. Like, are we still on this? And he caused such an uproar with that album. And then that. What
were the symbols? I do remember this. The Kabbalah is like the Kabbalah is like not even remotely like satanic. It's Jewish mysticism. Well, at its core, but then it's been completely taken beyond that now. I mean, if anything, it's what? So what? They were. I need to see these images. I can't believe I haven't seen them.
Yeah, I'll take a picture of my album for you. And basically, they took stuff from the Kabbalah and changed it a little bit for each member of the band. You know, to kind of like what Jimmy Page did with the Zoso.
Zoho, and all that kind of
stuff. Yeah, all of that stuff, Marilyn Manson, they did the same thing with the different members and their Kabbalah symbols, but they're switched around a little bit. But that was kind of like the last big Satanic Panic uproar that I can think of. And I don't know if we've like normalized it now to where it's just not an effective way to really
Well, I think also
freak people out.
Well, I think a lot of the people that would have had a problem with it are kind of no longer alive, which is not a very nice thing to say, but they aren't, because it was in the 90s. You're going back nearly 30 years. So, interest in the occult and occultism. I hate that word because it sounds so cheesy, but like things like people, it's a massive interest subject now. A lot of people are interested in it, and not from coming in from a very sort of practical standpoint where they're just kind of like, I want to better myself. So if you get into meditation heavily, you can't help but not, hear about like Hermeticism or the Hermetica or Kabbalah or things like that. They kind of all just blend into each other because they're all different, different disciplines within a similar kind of thing, which is effectively like consciousness expansion, like without drugs.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at, because I think that there was something that happened between around 2001 and now, and especially in TV shows and other types of media, like the TV show Supernatural, that would have been banned.
Well, Harry
in
Potter.
1990.
I mean, people still try and ban Harry Potter.
Harry
now,
Potter, yeah. I guess
they say it pushes, this idea of like, occultism and stuff like that. But it really doesn't. I mean, it's like, Christ's sake, if you think that, I mean, if you can look back, there's the really old pictures, artist depictions of Jesus that are very, very old. Like they're kind of some of the oldest ones they have that are in stone and clay and stuff like that, and tablets. He has a wand in some of them.
I've seen those. Yeah.
So what's he doing with a wand unless he's doing magic? And then you've got the whole Gnostic tradition, which is pre-Catholic Church, Christians, kind of Christians, but they're not. They have a very different belief system to what is now espoused by the Catholic Church, where their idea is that, and these are Christians, but they believe that the God that we have is the evil God. He's Yahweh isn't very nice, which would explain why he's such a grumpy git in the Old Testament. He's like, I'm vengeful. I'm going to kill your son for me. Kill your son for me. It's like, do you love me? It's like, I don't know. I don't believe you. Do something for me.
I'm going to sick these bears.
Yeah, and then I'm going to drown the whole planet because you angered me. So I'm going to bury you all underwater. But I'll let Noah can survive, and then he can repopulate the world with his incest babies. But yeah, it's very odd subject. It's a very loaded subject. But I think the reason why it's become more acceptable now is because, one, people have kind of more information available. Two, people realize that the church and the kind of like institutional Christianity, which has been the bedrock of Western civilization for, better part of 2,000 years, has kind of like been a bit they kind of lied a bit about the way things are. There's like the Gospel of Thomas, the difference between the King James Bible and the Bible that, the Greeks use. It's very different. You have an Ethiopian interpretation of it, and all these kind of new interpretations come out. And then also you have the Dead Sea Scrolls as well, that was a game changer. That changed loads of stuff, because that kind of reaffirmed a lot of the stuff that people speculated about the Gnostics based on the small amount of writing that they had about them. And that placed things, people like Sophia and stuff, and idea of a feminine god, way more into the mix than it was before. So yeah, I think it's very hard to be. I didn't know why you would be either. I think I always get this conversation. We used to get a lot of Ubers in London, and I'd be talking to people like taxi drivers and whatnot, and they'd be like, they were going to like the mosque afterwards. I said, what is? I'm going to go to the mosque. I'm like, oh, right, okay. I said, so you very religious? And he was like, yeah. And he said, are you? And I was like, oh, not really. I said, I just kind of think it's all barking up the same tree. It's just kind of like cultural interpretations of this higher power thing that exists. And they were like, no, you can't say that. And I'm like, well, come on. Like, why not? Why? It's 2023. Like, why not? Why can't I say that? Like, it's crazy. But the idea that, I think a bands of satanic and music is evil and stuff is crazy. I think it's not just crazy, but it's like, it's that whole culture of people that were hated where society was going because it was so different, because it was like a counterculture revolution, like the whole Nixon era, that kind of war on drugs, counterculture, hippies, love, peace and love, and hippies, and not people that are against the war machine, and sort of say Christian values, but it's just right wing values where it's, if it was Christian values, you wouldn't be kind of being like racist, horrible, bigotry people to, people that needed help.
Exactly.
But, that's just kind of my take on it. So, and I think it's just occultism and metal music and rock like Kiss and Black Sabbath, Alice Cooper. It kind of just became a way of like, they're the bad guys now. Let's just target them. Because we can't be our fault. We're the government. We can't be responsible for the downfall of society. So let's blame it on Ozzy Osbourne.
Well, can I say that I kind of miss it? Like, I kind of miss the outrage that people had. I mean, I remember, so I saw Nine Inch Nails during the Self-Destruction tour, which came out right after the Downward Spiral. And I was 15 or so. And I went to go see Nine Inch Nails, and there were people protesting. And this is in downtown Atlanta, Like, this is a pretty progressive city. And there's people out there protesting. There were hundreds of people protesting Nine Inch Nails and David Bowie because they thought that since it was an all-ages venue that, I guess kids were going to go in and they were going to be captivated by it. And they were going to put a spell on the children.
Captivate them with this amazing music.
And I saw Marilyn Manson in 1996 or 1997. I think it was 1997. And saw him in Atlanta also. And same thing. There were same people out there holding up signs. Weird. And
if you're processing somebody,
I kind of miss it.
I don't know. I don't that kind of stuff. I mean, what do you mean you miss it? You still get that in the States, right? What are those nutcases called that go around and like protest?
The Westboro Baptist Church.
Yeah, like picket like funerals and stuff. It's assholes.
They're mostly gone now, but I mean, I don't miss that aspect of it. I know
what you mean. You miss the kind of
counterculture.
The counterculture. I think it is still counterculture because it's not
and being able to kind of shock people a little bit. Like heavy metal is a little bit dangerous. Heavy music is a little scary.
This is the thing. I always think this is the thing that always annoys me about metal. Per se, because if you saw me walking down the street, you wouldn't think I look like somebody who listens to like metal music. And this kind of like this bravado that's around it, this sort of like, oh, you have to have long hair and you have to wear I mean, I do wear a lot of black, but I just wear black because I always have done. I'm a bit dyslexic with color, so. But it's this kind of like image that comes with it that's like really cheesy and just a bit like unnecessary, and I find it a bit like, but that's something that it's almost like people flying a flag being like, oh hey, we're alternative, if you're alternative come over here, so people can find each other, I think. And I think that had way more relevance before the internet, where it was very difficult to connect with people outside of the area that you lived in. So the easiest way to do it was basically in school, obviously, if you're like a kid and you dress a certain way or wear a certain t-shirt, and then you kind of gravitate towards the people that have the same band t-shirts as you or long hair.
That's how I found all of my friends. Because
me too. But that's how it was. You fly that flag, and they do it in prison though, don't they? That's what they do in prison, tattoos and stuff. So if you keep going to prison and you're in a gang, you want to basically have to do a lead. So you'd be like, well, I better get a swastika tattooed on my neck finally after all these years, so I don't get murdered when I go to a maximum security prison in America. But
yeah, that was how we found each other. Like one of my best friends that I've known my entire life, I approached him because he had on an Anthrax t-shirt. And another one that I still talk to today, I approached him because he had a Pantera t-shirt on, Yeah. And
people band together. That's the thing. You band together over like shared interests and stuff. But like prior to the internet, I think some people listening to this might not appreciate that as much because it was kind of hard. Like if you live in a city and it's 1998 and you go to like, you're out in town, you go to like a pub, it's kind of an easiest way to spot someone. It's like, oh, they might be into similar stuff to me because they kind of dress a bit similar. I like that band t-shirt I've got. Like, it's just kind of way of signaling like, hey, I'm in an interesting niche of people that likes a certain type of thing. Let's hang out.
Right. And now everything's kind of been blended together and homogenized a little bit,
Yeah, there isn't really any, I think the only kind of like shocking bit end tail to it was the kind of black metal stuff that came out in like the sort of late 90s, early 2000s, that was kind of like a real kind of like the last sort of crack of the whip for this. But again, we kind of touched on this earlier, and that wasn't, while they used like satanic images and burned churches down, that was more just kind of like they were just kind of anti everything, including their own band members, because some of them killed each other, didn't they? Which ones? Was it Burzum who killed?
That was Mayhem.
Mayhem, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was in the early 90s, and yeah, he spent the maximum sentence is 21 years for killing someone in Sweden, and he got out, and he's a
isn't he the guy
total
doesn't he have a
piece of
YouTube?
Shit.
Does he have a YouTube channel now?
Yeah,
he kind of lives in the sticks and moans about
Varg Verknes, I believe his name is.
Yeah, and he kind of just lives in the woods and moans about money, capitalism, and stuff.
Yeah, because he has it so hard in Sweden. But
yeah, exactly, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, past that and past Marilyn Manson, and then Cradle of Filth with their T-shirt that got banned.
Oh yeah, that came out when I was in school. I remember we had this kid in my class.
I had that T-shirt,
and I would never worn that T-shirt because I don't know. I think there's this defensive beyond. I would never do something that would offend somebody, like deeply offend them, just for the fun of it, because I think that's pretty mean. And my family, half my family are Catholic, so if I wore that, I would have been in big trouble. But there was a kid in my class who came to school with it, and we used to wear like white shirts with a tie, and he had it under his shirt, and you could see it straight away. And it was like when he came in, everyone was like, "No way!" And I think he lasted about an hour, and then a teacher spotted it, and then he got suspended. So,
but yeah,
but again, marketing, it's just marketing.
Yeah,
like, I guarantee you, without that T-shirt, probably 80% less people would know about Cradle of Filth, because that's how I knew about them. And it wasn't because I liked their music, because their music's awful. It was because of that T-shirt.
Actually, like Cradle of Filth a good bit.
Oh God, I hate it.
The first 3 or 4 albums, love it.
Nah, it's not my jam at all. It's just.
But that's teenage me. I go back and listen to it every now and then. That's teenage me.
I've heard it. People tried to play it to me before, and I'm just like, the vocals are no.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot, but it's not just because it's heavy, because I like music that's probably heavier than that. I just don't like the way it sounds. I think his voice is, I don't know, it kind of sounds like someone squeezing a rat.
In some places, yeah.
Yeah.
But like, I guess everything's kind of been homogenized now.
Like the pointy rings and stuff. And it's I don't even know what they're called. Those little weird little goth finger things.
Oh yeah, the gothic rings that all link together. Those are really big and hot topic in the 90s.
Well, they're probably going to be coming back now. So when you start seeing some kids walking around with those weird fingers coming, then you'll know why, because the 90s is now back in vogue, isn't it? So new metal's back, everything's back.
Well, I mean, it's just funny. I don't know. I was watching a Billie Eilish video the other day, and I think it's called Bury a Friend. And it's a really scary video. And it's something that would have been deemed satanic like 20 years ago. And now it's just completely accepted. Like,
what?
She won a Grammy for that.
Well, I think a lot of time now, and there's all this stuff with like CERN like to do a lot of their weird sort of satanic kind of opening ceremonies whenever they do stuff, which people like they have the Hindu god of death and stuff like that, and all the Christians are like, what are they doing these strange occult death dances when they turn on this black hole maker? And it's like, yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. They're just getting everyone ready. But I think the main thing is people just kind of desensitized. But I think the main thing is that people who are kind of really bothered by this, kind of real churchy people, are kind of either in senile and in old people's homes, or they're dead. They're not really around anymore. And it's like, you look at things with like horror films now, like some horror I like horror films as much as the next guy, but Christ, some of them now, they're so visceral, they're so nasty. Like, they're not even, it's not like scary, it's just kind of like chills you to like your very core of your being. Like, I watched this one the other night called When Evil Lurks. Oh my God. I literally never want to. Oh, dude. Oh, Jesus. It's just
Is it
horrible.
as bad as Hereditary?
It's way worse than Hereditary. Like, there's 2 scenes in that film that I don't ever want to ever see again. Ever.
Is it as bad as Terrifier?
I haven't watched that, because I watched When Evil Lurks, and I was like, well, if somebody say Terrifier is worse than that, I don't want to see it. So I'm getting to that age now where I'm going to be the guy that's going to be disgusted. Like, what are these kids watching? Satanic. It's like it's back in vogue to be a, purse clutching Maud Flanders about things. But Yeah, it's really it's pretty grim. But I think the internet desensitizes people a lot, and I think younger people, our generation, younger than us, are kind of like, religion's nonsense. So if you're into the occult and you like playing around with tarot cards and practicing astral projection and doing, Kabbalah at the weekends, then go for it.
That's fine.
Yeah, it is. But then it's also like things like drugs. It's a lot much more freer culture now. Like people kind of talk more openly about drugs and, hallucinogens like psilocybin, DMT, ayahuasca retreats and stuff. And spiritualism is kind of back, I think. I think it's back way more than it ever has been, way more than it used to be. And not in kind of like a woo-woo sense. There's obviously always that woo-woo kind of aspect to it. But I think from sort of like the the 90s onwards with like chaos magic and stuff like that, it kind of like redefined it and got people kind of interested in it. Like Grant Morrison did like a really, the Invisibles, and he did like a really great talk on like modern occultism and stuff and what it meant to him and how it inspired him to go off and sort of write, some of the best graphic novels of all time. Like Terence McKenna, huge advocate of, consciousness expansion, like, Hermeticism and that kind of stuff, and the beliefs that, looking into this stuff and the effects it can have on your mind, and then the kind of experiences you have on things like magic mushrooms or DMT or peyote, kind of how they've been talked about in these books and the crossover and stuff. And it's really interesting. Even like Carl Jung, he's talking about, active imagination and stuff like that. It's all. Well,
it's funny that you say that, because that's kind of where progressive metal has gone. Bands like Tesseract, they use fractals in their videos, and they talk about those experiences. They talk about out-of-body experiences, and they talk about what happens when you're on those kind of drugs in a kind of spiritual way. So progressive metal's kind of taken that up, and it's like kind of sci-fi, and it's kind of spiritual. And
well, it is. I mean, if you think about like what it is at its core, like basically like take something like modern, like Western Hermeticism, right? It's effectively just the process of working with either things that are native to the reality we live in, or part of your consciousness, and we don't know how your consciousness affects the reality we live in, or they're external to you. But it's a process of working with them to enact change in your life and your reality that you inhabit. And that's all it is. So, and it's all based on like Kabbalah is all based on words and numbers and sounds. So it maybe is some kind of like old technology that we interface with reality with on a different level. Because Kabbalah was always an oral tradition. It was always spoken from, a master down to an apprentice. It was already passed down. And a lot of more esoteric schools from, going back to like Pythagoras and, ancient Greeks, it was all done orally. And there's some really great books on this. Like there's so many good books on this kind of subject matter that you can just get into if you're just looking to kind of discover more about this sort of stuff.
As a matter of fact, you can give me a list and I'll put it in the description of this podcast episode.
Okay.
Because
I will. But I was always kind of interested from like a really engaged. Like this sounds like nonsense, but there's got to be something to this if all these people believe in it. And then when you get into like the esoteric and exoteric, and that the Vatican has these secret archives full of stuff from like Alexandria and even earlier, and you're like, well, what the hell are they hiding to prop up this belief system, which is everyone knows it's an amalgamation of loads of different things, and it's not even the full canon that's included in the official book. So there's more to it. There's more to life. There's more to reality than you think, and it's a lot going on, and you can interact with it, and you can be part of it, and it can help you, and you can grow. Even just stuff like meditation. I mean, Christ. I mean, meditation, our body experience, astral projection. That's something anyone can do with a bit of practice. And I think once you've done that, it kind of really changes your view on the way reality works.
Absolutely, your mind is capable of so many things.
It's non-local. That's the thing. That's the big takeaway.
You don't even.
Yeah, it's not a non-local thing.
It's indescribable what your mind is actually capable of, and I guess that's a good way to wrap everything up. But I hope everybody enjoyed this special episode, and we will be doing more special episodes where we talk about more I guess, kind of edgier topics that maybe you couldn't put on the regular channel. And we hope we covered some interesting ground here, because there's always been a link between rock and roll and evil, and I've always thought it was really, really cool.
Yeah. Well, also, I need to caveat that it's not evil. Like I say, the perception on the outside is that it's evil, but the actual, when you actually look into what it is, it's not evil.
It's not. No,
it's not. But it's that's the thing, and that's a big stumbling block for a lot of people. Like, so if someone's listened to this and they're in a very, they've been very, very strict Christian background and stuff, and they feel they have a lot of guilt associated with changing their belief system and stuff, which is a big thing. It's okay to look into other areas to find answers elsewhere, because Christian church isn't the be all and end all, and it doesn't have all the answers.
Never stop looking for answers.
Exactly.
Ever. But yeah, we will see you next week, and sayonara.
Take care.